Hello and welcome to another edition of Talking Points. We're happy to have you with us. Today we'll sit down with Jackie Riley of Girl Code to talk about sexual assault on college campuses, and we'll peek ahead at the 2016 presidential race. But first, President Obama said in a recent interview with The New Yorker that he thinks marijuana is no more dangerous than alcohol. Joining us for more on this is senior correspondent Alex Amico. Alex?
Thanks, Anna. Well, President Obama's claim that marijuana is no more dangerous than alcohol appears to have some merit. A recent study in the medical journal The Lancet showed that marijuana was both less harmful and less addictive than alcohol. Commander Ryan Buford of the Syracuse Department of Public Safety said that the department responds to fewer marijuana-related incidents than alcohol-related incidents each year, but the marijuana risks may not be what you would think.
And so if someone smokes marijuana, however, they smoke marijuana and in some way has been laced with some other type of substance, and you can name the substances out there that they're so abundant, then there may be other issues associated with that.
Buford says that while the amount of these incidents is relatively low, they are on the rise and dangerous.
The comparison in the numbers or the frequency is relatively low. However, it's the type of event I like to define probably as low probability but high impact. So when someone has consumed marijuana and it has some other substance in that marijuana, or they just simply have an adverse reaction to it, doesn't happen as often, but when it does, it's much more serious.
Proponents of marijuana legalization say that legalizing marijuana would cut down on the risks of these sorts of incidents, as legal dispensaries would be less likely to lace their products with potentially dangerous substances. Anna?
All right, Alex. So the Obama administration has previously taken very tough stances on marijuana. In 2010, Attorney General Eric Holder came out and said he would vigorously enforce federal laws against marijuana. So does the new developments now suggest a policy shift?
I think it absolutely does. I think that the Obama administration has gone through a pretty dramatic evolution on the issue of marijuana. Recently, when Colorado and Washington legalized recreational marijuana in those states, the Department of Justice said that they would not interfere with those laws. And more recently, in the past week, the Treasury Department laid out new guidelines for banks to do business with legal marijuana sellers. Now, this doesn't make banks completely immune from federal prosecution, but it is a step for legalization.
Right, because everyone who was running a marijuana business was having to use cash for operations, everything from selling their products to paying their utility bill. So that's a big step. So this is a booming business, Alex. I mean, this is something that we're still testing the waters in here in America. It could be on the verge of a big business here. What's the future?
Well, an ArcView market research study showed that legal marijuana is the fastest growing domestic industry in the United States. It's growing faster than smartphones right now. By the end of this year, it's projected to be a $2.3 billion industry, and in 5 years, that number is projected to skyrocket to $10 billion.
And what about enforcement here? That's my big question. As you mentioned that the Department of Justice, I mean, they're making this transition over to maybe laying off a little bit on the enforcement. What about these, again, throughout the states, what about federal enforcement? Are we going to see that decrease a little bit?
Well, I think we're going to see more states legalize. Some studies show, some estimates say that about 14 states will legalize in the next 5 years, and we could see even more than that in the future as more estimates come out of those states and how the legal marijuana industry has helped those states. For example, Colorado is projected to rake in $67 million more in revenue this year just from the legal marijuana industry. So I think that as states see that there is a potential for economic growth with legal marijuana, I think you'll see legalization start to rise in the United States.
Right, and lastly here, Alex, a political issue. Marijuana, like we said, it's becoming a booming topic. Officials are having to come out and give their position. Do you think marijuana is going to find its way into future campaigns?
I think it's going the same route as same-sex marriage right now, where the general trend right now is that neither party is going to take a moral stance on it. No one's going to. Parties probably won't say that there's a moral argument against marijuana, but I think that it is going to be the question of legalize it federally or leave it to the states, and I think that's where you're going to see the difference between the two parties in the future. Not necessarily should we legalize marijuana, but how should we legalize marijuana.
Excellent. Thanks, Alex. And when we come back, we'll be joined in the studio by Jackie Riley of the Girl Code to talk about sexual assault on college campuses. Stay tuned.
Welcome to my block party. Glad you can make it.
The only triple doubles you get come with fries.
Last time you blocked someone, you were online.
I can do this all day. Your moves are just gay.
Using gay to mean dumb or stupid, not cool.
Not cool. Not in my house, not anywhere.
It's not creative.
It's offensive to gay people.
And you're better than that.
Learning how to kickflip 6 stairs takes determination. So will getting into college. I've got what it takes. So do you.
You realize that 49 million Americans struggle with hunger? That's 1 out of every 6 Americans.
These people are around us every day. They're our friends, they're our coworkers, their kids go to school with our kids.
Sometimes we're not even aware that they're struggling. This problem is closer than you think. But so is the solution.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
Hello and welcome back. We discuss a topic now that's been getting some recent major national attention as well as local attention. Joining me now is our senior correspondent, John Tamino, and the leader and a co-founder of the Girl Code movement, Jackie Riley. So to start us off, we're going to focus on President Obama mentioned a new task force that he's creating to address sexual assault on college campuses. John, can you brief us a little bit on the intentions of this task force?
Yes, in January last month, he organized the task force. It's all Obama administration officials with the goal of really looking at sexual assault on college campuses and making sure that colleges and universities document what's been going on, making sure that they investigate fully, that they find ways for anybody who's been a victim of rape or sexual assault to get resources, counseling, whatever they need to get back on their feet and piece their life back together. They also want to hold colleges to that standard and make sure that they're doing these things with the threat of a federal investigation into how the report was handled. So they really want to make sure that everything is being done to make sure that rape victims are not left, to just fend for themselves after such a horrifying experience. Jackie, what do you see? Do you see it as an optimistic thing as a former victim of sexual assault?
I'm very optimistic about it. I'm not sure how effective it will be. However, I think it's a good start. It's creating a conversation around this that a lot of universities don't look at. A lot of universities don't have proper advocacy centers. So I think it's good. Not sure yet, but I think it's a step in the right direction, for sure.
And as I mentioned, it's all Obama administration officials that are part of the task force. Do you think if they were consulting young women that are at colleges, universities that are victims of sexual assault, as to what they can do? Do you think they would make things better? Do you think it would open new doors for them to do things?
Yeah, I think it'd be great for both young women and young men to help the officials with this, because they're living in these environments where they see this every day. So to have that perspective, I think would only benefit it.
Right, and this is the type of task force, it's in its beginning stages. He's only coordinating federal law enforcement right now, so I really hope the White House follows through on this, because looking at some of the statistics here, the White House Council on Women, put out a stat saying 1 in 5 women have been assaulted, but only 12% actually report it. So, like I mentioned, Jackie, your movement has gotten a lot of attention. We know the basic premise behind it is to get both men and women more active in preventing sexual assault. Could you give us one main goal that you're focusing on with the organization?
For Syracuse University in specific, we want to get this conversation around this topic started. A lot of people don't talk about it. Before this happened to me, had no idea that this was a problem. 1 in 5 is a huge percentage of this college campus, and I never knew. And a lot of people just don't talk about it. So I think that's the biggest thing is awareness, is what we're trying to do.
Exactly. And you know, what interests me too is that 12%, only 12% even report it. So there's a huge portion of women who aren't even mentioning it. And you know, as a survivor of assault, can you explain the mentality behind that? Why are women not stepping up and reporting this?
For a lot of reasons. One, they blame themselves if drugs or alcohol were ever involved. They feel as if they will be punished for it, or they somehow created the situation to happen, so it's their fault, which is never the case. However, some victims do feel as such. Also, fear of future attack is a big one, and it's scary to be in that position. So a lot of people just ignore it.
And you do mention that the Girl Code movement wants to create a discussion, but also action, I would assume too. So what do you want women and also men to do? I know you talk about empowered bystanders. Can you just explain a little more about those kind of things?
Yeah. So what we ideally want is to make people aware of how to be an empowered bystander in certain situations. So alcohol, drugs, and bad relationships create this environment where it makes women, for the Girl Code, and even young men, it puts them at risk of being in a situation where they could be sexually assaulted or raped. So we want people to be aware of how many people it is, and then be like, okay, so this girl has had too much to drink, I'm gonna take her home, I'm gonna take care of her. It's taking action when you see those things that put people at risk.
Right, and so kind of the main goal here is to get women watching out for each other.
Yes, exactly.
And in the past, what are some of the issues behind that? A lot of the times we'll see women in parties who just don't want to take that step. Is it fear? Do they not want to get involved?
A lot of people, if you don't know them, it's a lot harder to. It's awkward. I don't know her. I don't know if that boy is her boyfriend, or all these things that we create as excuses. What we want is, even if it's awkward, even if you're gonna maybe upset the girl that you would even ask, it's better to be in that position and be like, hey, are you okay, than it is to have her in tears the next morning.
Right.
Did that answer your
question?
Exactly.
Exactly.
You mentioned in President Obama's task force really wants to make sure that universities are doing all they can to help victims. How do you see that here at Syracuse University?
I'm very proud of Syracuse University for the institutions that they have in place to handle these things. I see a lot of universities like Emerson where they don't have proper advocacy centers. We have an advocacy center on campus. We have a counseling center. For me, when I reported and I went to the hospital, DPS was all over it. They contacted the advocacy center for me, where the director came and sat with me at the hospital and explained to me all my options. She set up my counseling appointments, and they are very hands-on here, which a lot of universities are not.
Now, if you don't mind, after the Girl Code movement was formed, you've got a lot of publicity, you've gotten a lot of positive feedback, a lot of support, but I'm sure there's also been people who have been trying to talk about the negatives of what you as an organization are doing. Can you talk about the critics and what they have to say and what your response to them would be?
Thankfully, we haven't had too much negative feedback. However, there is some. A lot of it is personal attacks. For me, my situation involves alcohol. So I get a lot of, you deserved it. And not so much criticism on the movement itself, but on my personal situation, if that makes any sense. So there's definitely that in place, but that's an idea that's in society. That's not necessarily against me, that's just how rape culture and victim blaming is in America.
And and I'm interested too in the way hospitals are handling this. There have been reports, there was something released in the Daily Orange about some hospitals not even having the proper tests on hand. Yeah. Would you mind sharing with us your situation, describing your process? What happened, who did you talk to, and where were some deficiencies that may be able to be fixed?
Sure, so I, the next day, went to Crouse Hospital. I didn't go until later in the afternoon, so I did not know that for a full rape kit, you cannot shower, you cannot go to the bathroom, you cannot remove your clothes. And I had done all those things that day because I had other events to go to before I was going to go to the hospital. I just didn't really think about it that day. So I destroyed a lot of evidence. Also, I could not prove that there had been date rape drugs in my drink because Crouse Hospital did not have the test for it. So that's another thing that they just didn't have. And if by the time I went to another hospital, the drugs would have been out of my system. However, the one thing they did do, they were very helpful with me emotionally because my doctors were rape victims themselves. But a lot of those things for proper evidence for a court case, they did not have in place for me. So that is a downfall on their part.
Exactly. You know, Jackie, a lot of people don't understand the emotions surrounding sexual assault. I've read articles on your situation and what happened. Would you be able to explain to people how you were feeling? You know, you woke up and didn't know what was going on. Can you explain the fear, the emotions behind sexual assault to someone who may not understand?
The moment. Okay, so it was terrifying. And for me personally, I tried not to feel it. I'm a very different case. I am not even 6 months yet. So I've been very active in sharing my story. And a lot of people, when they wake up in these situations, they want to forget about it. They want to say, oh, that never happened, and then it eats at them. But it's terrifying. You wake up and you have no idea, especially if alcohol or drugs were involved, you have no idea exactly what happened, which makes it even harder to cope with.
Excellent. No, truly inspiring story there, Jackie. You know, only a sophomore, so great job of making headway on this, and we appreciate you coming on today. And when we come back, how has the Chris Christie scandal impacted the Republican field for 2016? Stay tuned.
As a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. I'll teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
I think someone at my friend's school has this thing called autism. My friend's brother's son has autism. My neighbor's son has autism. My son has autism.
Autism is getting closer to home. Today, 1 in 88 children is diagnosed with autism. That's a 1,000% increase in the last 40 years. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
You realize that 49 million Americans struggle with hunger? That's 1 out of every 6 Americans.
These people are around us every day. They're our friends, they're our coworkers, their kids go to school with our kids.
Sometimes we're not even aware that they're struggling. This problem is closer than you think. But so is the solution.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
Welcome back. We now turn to our correspondent Will Gerhard about the 2016 presidential election and what's coming up in that regard. So in our last show, we discussed Chris Christie and the Bridgegate scandal and how that's impacting his poll numbers. Can you give us a brief synopsis of that, Will, and whether or not it's tearing down his chances for 2016?
Well, Anna, in October, he had a 62% approval rating. He was the frontrunner for the GOP party and, believe it or not, still remains to have the highest approval rating out of all candidates today. However, the most recent poll, which came out on January 28th, showed an approval rating of 48%. That was his lowest since 2011. A lot of this was the independent vote. He lost a lot of the independent vote, a lot of the vote of the youth, of the 18 to 25 demographic. Still, he is challenging Hillary in the state of New Jersey, which is, of course, a historically blue state. But he has lost a lot of his leeway there, too. Back in December, he had 48% of the national vote compared to Hillary's 46. Now, only 39 to Hillary's 55. So he is certainly, on a downward spiral with his approval rating, but still the front runner for the GOP.
Right, Will, and I wanted to mention, while he is facing all of this controversy surrounding Bridgegate, that entire scandal, but we got to point out here that as a Republican governor, he's won a Democratic state twice. So there's some appeal here. Back in 2012, he was the front runner. He was the guy to go to. So if we put this into perspective, he's still doing a lot better than other candidates, correct? Possible GOP candidates.
Absolutely, and I mean, some candidates we'll discuss further in the program, such as Rand Paul, with what he's been doing with the NSA lately, has drawn some criticism from the independent vote from the left.
Right.
Marco Rubio, his flip-flop stance on immigration, some more criticism from the left and from the independent vote as well.
Exactly. I wanted to move on to some other people where you can look at in the race here, Will. Who are some of the top contenders on the Republican side?
Well, we're going to look at three prominent figures today, and then a sleeper, someone who hasn't really been in the picture yet, but a face that is on the rise. We're going to start with Paul Ryan, Anna. Of course, he was the vice president hopeful back in 2012 when he was Mitt Romney's running mate. He since then, though, he's been the head of the Ways and Means Committee, and he's also been chairing the House Budget Committee. He's been very adamant about keeping those seats, so it'll be interesting come 2016, but he is still certainly up there.
Right, and he was, he's been a part of some big deals on Capitol Hill. In a recent, we're all used to the budget showdown in Washington. We seem to see those every couple of months, but he's recently been high profile in those, coming out with major bipartisan budget deals. So would his experience on the Ways and Means Committee, he's pretty qualified for the presidential in terms of working with Congress, right?
Right, absolutely. And I mean, the thing that Paul Ryan has going for him the most is he's a young face, he's a smart face, he appeals to a lot of the young voters. He, whether you lean right, you lean left, you consider yourself independent. He's had so many responsibilities with the budget. He can be considered, a fiscal and budget expert. And of course, in this 2016 election, where the debt ceiling is over $17 trillion now, it would be important if the GOP were to win to have a fiscal expert on board.
Right. And talking about election issues, it's the Hispanic vote that's been killing Republicans that Obama picked up the most of. And so let's move on to Marco Rubio. Is his appeal to Hispanics good enough for the Republican Party? Is he going to bring a comeback here?
Well, Marco Rubio first came on the scene in 2012 when he delivered an address at the Republican National Convention. He, of course, is the son of two Cuban immigrants. He, most importantly, is a senator in Florida, which is, of course, a huge battleground state, one that has caused a lot of controversy in past elections. So if the Republicans were to win the 2016 election, they should start with Florida. That would be very helpful for them. The thing about Rubio also is he caters to the Hispanic demographic unlike any modern-day Republican candidate ever has. He also caters to the young demographic, and that is certainly two huge points that he has going for him going forward.
Right, and it's worth mentioning that Marco Rubio was part of the original Gang of Eight, which was a gang on Capitol Hill that was focusing on immigration reform, but then he removed himself from that process. So that's another note worth mentioning. Now let's move on to Rand Paul. Recently filed a lawsuit against the NSA. Is that increasing his profile?
Well, I'll tell you what, Rand Paul is certainly the fastest on the rise in terms of all the candidates, but he recently made a very interesting comment about the future of the GOP in a radio interview with radio host Glenn Beck. Take a listen.
But I will tell you that I think Republicans will not win again in my lifetime for the presidency unless they become a new GOP, a new Republican Party, and it has to be a transformation.
Now, and of course, with Rand Paul being the son of Ron Paul, he is viewed as the libertarian poster child. He's viewed as this new conservative party that is kind of developing. He's viewed as the head of that. Going forward, however, his wife doesn't want him to run. His family is not really behind him, so he's kind of swayed off any potential possibility of him running. But it will still be interesting to see because, like you said, with the everything he's been doing with the NSA against the Democratic Party and the Obama administration lately, it's really put some wind behind Republican voters' sails, and he's just trying to define this new conservative party.
Right. Moving on to some sleepers here, Will. There was an interesting response to President Obama's State of the Union, a woman who gave the Republican response. Kathy McMorris, who is she? Is she someone that's solid? Well, can she appeal to a Republican, not just a Republican, but also a Democratic base?
Well, of course, as always, there's the John Huntsmans of the world, the Dr. Ben Carsons of the world, the Rob Portmans, the Mike Huckabees, who year in and year out, their name is kind of thrown out there, but nothing's really definite until a few months before the election. Kathy McMorris Rodgers, her GOP rebuttal was viewed very favorably from the right. She's a woman, a very down-to-earth lady, and those, of course, are two things that the right has struggled with in the past in catering to during election time. She's very relatable, a very likable person, so going forward, she may not be a presidential candidate. She currently is in the House of Representatives for this, the state of Washington. So it will be interesting. She's most likely a vice presidential candidate, but still a name on the rise, a name to look out for.
Exactly, and that wraps up for the Republican nominees. I mentioned to throw in for Democrats is Hillary Clinton still hasn't come out and voiced her run for the presidential candidate, but we will monitor that. Thanks for joining us this evening on Talking Points. We appreciate you watching, and goodbye.
Viking, red state, blue state, vegan,
carnivore.
We come from different places.
Uptown, downtown,
night owl,
early bird.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty, half full.
But when we live united, we create real, lasting change in the building blocks of life. The education, income, and health of our communities, our families, even the person next to us.
Live united.
Real change won't happen without you. So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up at liveunited.org.
Now it's time for This Week in Bad Stats.
Bad stats?
Horrible stats. Here goes. 132.
That's how many batters struck out 4 times in one game last season.
Wow, very good. Here's a tough one, though. 3 and 4.
No idea.
That's how many kids witness bullying. 3 out of 4.
That's not a good stat.
No, it's not, but it can change. Kids want to help, but they don't know how. Visit stopbullying.gov and give them the tools they need to help prevent bullying.
There are plenty of safe ways kids can help at stopbullying.gov.
Welcome back, and before we wrap up tonight, we want to look ahead to our next show, and a major topic that came up in the this presidential State of the Union was income inequality. So our correspondent here, Hunter Sines, joins us. What did President Obama say during his State of the Union about income inequality, and how is he going to address it?
Yeah, well, basically, he wanted to raise minimum wage. That was his biggest focus on his address. Since his address was made, he used his executive powers to raise minimum wage to $10.10 for federal workers. However, in his address, he called on Congress to raise minimum wage for all Americans. Now, Congress has opposed this in the past, and they still seem to have that same attitude right now. Therefore, he said that he will use another executive order to get this agenda through if Congress does not act. Another note, an important note, he said this will be a focus during this next congressional election, so it'll be interesting to see what plays out.
Exactly. All right, Hunter, and income inequality is an issue here in Syracuse as well, as no stranger here. And, you walk half a mile down the road from the university and you can see the vast wealth disparity. Can you paint a picture for us here, Hunter, of what are the numbers in terms of income inequality here in Syracuse?
Yeah, well, some big numbers include the estimated median household income. Here in Syracuse, it's $30,000 compared to $55,000 statewide here in New York. So Syracuse is falling behind. Another big percentage is 31% of people here in Syracuse are under the poverty level, compared to 14% here in New York State.
Great. We look forward to your report next week. Thanks, Hunter. And that about wraps us up here on Talking Points tonight. Thanks for watching us. Be sure to like us on Facebook and get more information through our blog posts. We'll see you next week.